Well, welcome everybody. We will go ahead and call this work session to order. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Corliss,
Here.
Halliburton,
Here.
Morales,
Here.
Nash,
Here.
Stead,
Here.
Willits.
Here.
All present.
Thank you. So first off, we've got Maureen and team here for the zoning code. As she's getting set up, I just wanted to say a couple things. First off, this is a well-anticipated, really looking forward to this discussion about the updates. As you'll recall, and the public will recall, when we passed the zoning code, we said we knew that we needed to continue to iterate, make improvements, and that we'd welcome feedback from users of the code, from the public, anybody engaged. And so today we have both technical corrections that are just par for the course that we'll be moving through with this. But Maureen is here to touch on a third round of policy updates that we're ready for discussion. Look forward to your recommendations and moving forward with this. I really appreciate the work of our PDS team that's gone into getting us to this point and the feedback that we've gotten from the public. And I want to encourage the public to continue to give us feedback because our goal in this is to get something going, knowing that it's not going to be perfect, but not let the perfect get in the way of progress and correct as we need to. And so all the willing partners and partnership that's been offered from the public to help us problem solve and make this code even better to make sure that we've got more homes for more people on the ground, I deeply appreciate. And with that, I'll have Maureen take over.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. And Mayor Council, thanks for having me here today. This is my first time in front of you in my new role, so I'm happy to be here. Excited about that. Yes.
Oh my goodness. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
In your new role. Sorry, I didn't say something about that.
Okay. No, it's exciting to be here and to bring forward some of these thoughtful recommendations from staff. And I also wanted to just briefly point out that Deanna Dupuy, who's up here with me this afternoon, has really worked hard with her team to bring forward some really thoughtful revisions and recommendations for components of the zoning code. And to your point, Mayor, making sure that we are continuing to make progress and improvements. So I am planning to present to you today. Here's our agenda. As I mentioned, of course, I have Deanna here, Josh Wilson, Kyle Patterson, Nikki Hellenkamp, and others are here depending on the specificity of the questions. They're really the technical experts doing this work. So as we get into sort of the meat of the presentation, we can do questions as we go along, or we can hold those till the end. And I've got my support team here as well. I wanted to start by providing a little bit of brief context, which I think is important because the proposed changes we are going to present to you today, we intend that these align with our planning goals. And the planning goals are really bigger than the zoning code itself, but the code is that primary tool that makes these these goals manifest. So the code is really what enables our community to achieve these. And I just wanted to make a couple of brief comments on each of them. So in terms of housing abundance, what we're really seeking with this goal is to ensure that Boise offers a sufficient amount and a diverse range of housing options to meet the needs of all residents. Unsurprisingly, this is really underpinned by our strategic initiative of a home for everyone. And then as far as a connected community is concerned, this goal is really about facilitating transportation choice and enabling residents to drive less and then also drive shorter distances to meet their daily needs. Fiscal sustainability, what we're seeking here is to expand responsibly and ensure that development supports public investment and that growth can be afforded by taxpayers over the long term. The public realm, we want to continue to ensure that Boise is made up of welcoming, human-scaled places that reflect our local identity, and that we're prioritizing designing a city that enhances walkability, that enhances accessibility, and also a sense of place. Climate action, working toward land use patterns and buildings that are less resource consumptive. So think about water, energy, land, material, and also more resilient. And then our ecological systems, we want to continue to grow with nature and protect the integrity of our natural systems. We're talking about the river, the foothills, our tree canopy as part of our future growth. And then, as I mentioned, one of the ways that we can pursue and achieve our planning goals is through implementation of the code. It's one of the primary ways we're able to do that, and the framework that it operates within. So I just wanted to make a few brief comments about this framework and the points here. One is that the code seeks to optimize our public investments by focusing new development and infrastructure in areas where the city is already investing. Second is that the code seeks to, of course, add increased density in those areas where we're directing growth, but also the code seeks to enable kind of thoughtful and subtle density in neighborhoods while also maintaining neighborhood character and, in fact, also enhancing it. And then third, the code seeks to intentionally pursue both affordable and sustainable housing by use of an incentive package that we'll talk more about a bit later. And the mayor said this in kind of her opening comments, to maximize or optimize the zoning code, its framework, the goals we're trying to achieve. Since the code's effective date in December 2023, staff has processed and completed 2 zoning ordinance amendments, or ZOAs. One was related to the appeals procedures for CUPs, and then another was focused on a set of necessary technical edits and then also enabling the permitting of tiny homes on wheels. We are now bringing forward a 3rd ZOA for consideration. This also has another round of technical edits and then a set of policy areas. So I have just one slide here that references and acknowledges the set of 49 technical edits. I did not plan to review those edits in today's work session. But again, if you have specific questions about those, we can dig into that if there's questions. And then I do plan, I've just got a slide each for the 6 policy topics, go through recommendations that staff has related to EV, bike parking, junior ADUs, permitting accessory units to single family homes, the zoning incentives that we initially presented in August. We'll talk about where we are on those, and then the airport influence area, specifically the B1 overlay. Okay, so on EV charging, we have had, and I'm sure you've received this feedback as well, significant feedback related to the code's current EV charging requirements. So in response to that, staff is actually recommending removing the EV requirement for all development and instead including an EV parking requirement through the incentives. So specifically, we're recommending that for housing projects with greater than 20 parking spots and that are opting to use the sustainability incentives, that we would require 5% of those spaces to be EV ready. And then on bike parking, like we have for EV, we've also received a significant amount of feedback about the current requirements and sort of the onerous nature of those. So we're recommending some changes that we believe still align with our goals related to mobility. First, we'd like to introduce an alternative compliance review. This would allow the planning director flexibility in bike parking location or design when that proposed alternative still meets the intent of the bike parking standards. This flexibility could also include providing parking for scooters, skateboards, or micromobility devices. And then second, rather than prohibit bike parking enclosures within the setbacks, We would prefer to instead reference the permitted setback encroachment standards that apply to other site features. So some alignment there. And then third, we would recommend reducing the required number of bike parking spaces to 1 space per unit. This does 2 things. One, it better aligns with the median number of bike parking spaces required by comparable cities that we researched. And then 2, it's also consistent with the original staff recommendation included in the original modern zoning code proposal. And then finally, we have come to recognize that industrial uses have unique needs related to bike parking. So we'd also propose replacing what is currently a ratio in the code with, again, planning director discretion to help determine the appropriate number of bike parking spaces. And this would be based on the employee or customer serving portion of that industrial use. Then on junior ADUs, with the goal here being to, 1, allow them, and 2, make it easier to do, staff recommend allowing a second kitchen. The key here is that this would be within the same unit. So currently in the zoning code, any second kitchen within the same or a single unit is classified as a separate unit, therefore defined as an ADU or a duplex, therefore triggers additional building code requirements. So our proposed edit would enable junior ADUs in effect in-law suites without triggering the need for those extra requirements. So you wouldn't need to have a fire separation wall or door, for example. And this is really what has served as the barrier to creation of this type of unit to date. Council also asked us to look into the feasibility of permitting 2 ADUs. And so staff recommend amending the code to do that. So permitting up to 2 accessory residential units. It could be 2 ADUs, 2 tiny homes on wheels, or 1 of each. So accessory to a single family home. Staff also, however, just want to note here, recommend that as part of the next ZOA, we explore how to achieve or enable parity among ADUs, single family homes, attached and detached, and the plexes. So duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes. What I want to note as it relates to sort of the importance of creating such parity is that we anticipate that permitting 2 ADUs on a single lot may impact other areas of the code, including the neighborhood affordability incentives and the requirements associated with permitting all of these various housing types. So we anticipate that future refinements will be needed to ensure there's underlying logic between these housing types related to key requirements. So think about infrastructure, lot size, design, parking, and that will better facilitate both housing supply and diversity of housing type.
Madam Mayor, do you want us to keep all of our questions to the end or? Okay. Maureen, congratulations. Good to see you here.
Thank you. Nice to be
Presenting like
here.
a champ. Thank you so much. I have a technical question that I need clarity on this. So is there a minimum lot size to then allow for 2 ADUs?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Willetts, so you would have the minimum lot size for the single family home,
Mhm.
and you can add 2 ADUs on that. So if you're in R1C, the minimum lot size is 3,500 square feet, and you can add 2 ADUs.
Madam Mayor and Deanna, I think because there are also certain like setback requirements and things like that that would probably naturally limit what some people might like. I know in my backyard I can't fit 2 ADUs because of the other requirements that would be necessary to fit. So I think that there's like, as in the form-based code, there's like natural parameters, I guess, in restricting some of those on some lots.
And Mayor, council members, that's right. And we want to make sure, as far as this parity recommendation is concerned, that those natural parameters or others, ones that we have imposed, are done with intentionality.
No, you go.
Madam Mayor, Maureen, will you remind us about what the state will and will not allow with an HOA? So if I live in a home that has an HOA, I can't put an ADU right now if it's prohibited with the HOA right now, correct? Like there's,
Mayor, Councilmember Willetts, I don't know that I have that answer for you today.
Madam Mayor, as it stands right now, I think internal ADUs would be allowed, external would be prohibited.
so if that's the case, you would have to add onto your home. There's no way to have a separate dwelling if you have an HOA that prohibits it.
Madam Mayor, I just wanted to support that suggestion from staff and seeing kind of like where there might be synergies or what maybe unintended consequences might arise by that. And I would also ask maybe that you keep in mind my ultimate goal is to not make it more difficult to build plexes and the town whatever else might be on the list for that to add to that diversity of housing. So with that in mind, of like if there's things we could remove rather than add in as far as restrictions and guidelines that might help facilitate, I think those are the we've seen some ADUs go in, which is great, but not nearly as many as the plexes as I think as we'd like to see. So as long as we can keep that hat on as best we can of like how can we continue to encourage the development of these in neighborhoods where it makes sense, rather than make it more, I don't know, more red tape, if you will. Thank you.
Mayor, council member, and that's our intent with this evaluation. And it's likely that we would want to come back before you so that you can help us evaluate what those trade-offs might be.
And just to be clear, that will be separate from this code change related to ADUs. So we'll address the interest in ADU changes now, move that forward if council agrees. And then one of the next iterations that we do on improvements is looking at plexes.
Mayor, that's correct. Okay, moving on to zoning incentives. You all might remember that Kyle Patterson was before you in August about recommended updates to the housing and sustainability incentives. This was after a significant effort to root the incentives in what's financially feasible to encourage additional sustainable and affordable housing. So we've held on to these changes since August rather than sending them through as a separate ZOA for a couple of reasons. One of those reasons was that we wanted to consolidate the recommended changes to the incentives with what is currently proposed, and we'll talk about that in short order. And then I also just wanted to flag that it's also important for us to limit or time or be intentional about how often staff and users of the code have to navigate multiple versions and iterations of it because it causes confusion and frustration, frankly. So consolidating these into one ZOA made sense. That being said, I wanted to remind you of what was included in the proposal from the summer, because really the recommendation remains largely the same. So first, we are recommending a simplified and more flexible approach. We had feedback that the current structure is confusing, that the one-size-fits-all nature of the current structure was not conducive to using the incentives. So we're proposing this simplified menu structure, which allows developers to choose what incentives are most valuable to them. We also importantly wanted to right size key affordability requirements. So we started to toggle with the area median income, so the level of affordability, the number percentage of units required, and then also the period of affordability. And just to remind you, the recommendation is to shift from 60% AMI to 80% AMI, and that's because 60% AMI units really require subsidy. You can't incent them. It doesn't pencil financially. And then recommend moving from 25% of units designated as affordable to 10%. Again, kind of toggling with what's financially feasible and rooting that in an analysis. And then finally, extending the period of affordability from 20 to 50 years. And as I recall, that might have been a little bit surprising. And I think probably was to us too, as we learned what other cities are doing and what developers really care about in terms of how we're shifting these affordability terms. And then finally, as far as what's staying the same, we are proposing an expanded menu of incentive options, and that menu reflects what developers shared with us about what would actually incent them to include affordability or sustainability. So that's what's staying the same. And then those final three bullets reflect the changes that we've made since the summer, given the updated context of this currently proposed zoning ordinance amendment. So we are recommending removing the alternative compliance for bike parking from the incentives menu. And that's because we're recommending a revised approach to bike parking standards generally. We are recommending adding a requirement for EV parking for participation in the sustainability incentives. And then we also just wanted to point out that staff have made some very minor technical edits to improve implementation. And just to give you a couple of quick examples of what those edits might include, it's things like formatting in a table or ensuring consistent use of terms.
Madam Mayor. Maureen, on this one, I know I've shared with you my feelings privately on this, but as it relates to the affordability and sustainability incentives, I'm thinking more about the triplexes and fourplexes. And in the same vein that Councilmember Stead mentioned earlier, we really want to see if we can unlock those in a similar way that we've done ADUs. What do you think we could expect from you over the next year as it relates to sustainability and affordability incentives and some of those, and as it relates to kind of some of those smaller plexes?
Yeah, Mayor McLean, Council President Nash, it's a good question. And it's one that's really at the heart of that parity question about how do we unlock housing supply and diversity of housing type. Um, what I can say today is that we have a bit of a hypothesis or a hunch, if you will, that the neighborhood housing incentives may not be what moves the needle in order to do that, but rather this effort to ensure that it's as easy to build a single family home with two accessory units as it is to do a duplex, as it is to do a townhome, as it is to do a triplex. So that is the heart of the work that we are going to undertake in sort of balancing supply, diversity of housing type, affordability, and sustainability. And we've got some work to do there before I can give you a sort of a better, more informed answer.
Thank you.
Okay, so last policy topic area, at least in terms of recommended changes, has to do with the airport influence area B1 overlay, sort of a mouthful. What I want to share with you about this is that airport and PDS staff have a joint recommendation here, and that is to remove the conditional use permit requirement for additional density within the B1 overlay. So if you're looking at this map, the B1 overlay is depicted in the tan color within both the purple circle and the red circle. So instead of a CUP, staff are recommending permitting by right residential densities of up to 25 units per acre in areas outside the noise contour. So I'm talking about the area that's circled in purple. and then limiting density to 5 units per acre in areas within the noise contour, and that is the area circled in red.
Madam Mayor. Maureen, thank you. I know that we've had a couple of land use decisions that have addressed this. Could you provide us, obviously not today, you're not Google, but how many this would affect if this had been in place? Like, are we looking at 5 developments, 10 developments? I just like to have some sense of the numbers in which this is driving at.
Do you want to speak to, I mean, there's one that I would imagine she can speak to now, and that's the one that you guys heard last year.
Yeah, Mayor, Councilmember Willetts, happy to do that. So you've heard one recently, and that was in the B1 overlay outside of the noise contour.
So purple, pretty much.
Purple.
Yeah, let's
Yes.
just call it by colors: purple, red.
Perfect. Thank you.
Great.
So that was purple. And I believe, Josh, if I'm not mistaken, went up to 26 units. 26 units. And then just last night, P&Z heard a conditional use permit request for a development within red to exceed 5 units per acre. It would have gone up to 7 units per acre. Staff recommended denial for the reasons we presented here, and P&Z supported that.
So, I mean, the gist of it is thinking about that purple area. The request that you heard last year, the appeal that the council approved, wouldn't have had to go through that entire process to be able to build those homes.
Madam Mayor, I'd also just, I think we actually technically had a second one, but it was like 5.1 units per acre. If we remember, right next to Maple Grove Elementary. And I think that, do we, first of all, thank you for kind of thinking through this process. Obviously, as planning and airport came together on this, the intention is to signal to potential developers that this is possible, because the prior requirements at 5 units per acre are so small that we maybe saw that, like that 5.1 unit per acre project come before us, that a developer would say, well, that's what they want there.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is kind of a signal, right, that this area makes a lot of sense with its amenities and services, correct?
Mayor, Councilmember Morales, I believe so, yes.
Madam Mayor.
Mhm.
Maureen, the one thing I just want to flag, and I don't want to contradict myself and maybe how aggressive I've been about reevaluating this, but I just want council to be aware that the noise contour maps do not necessarily account for future growth of the airport. So as we consider what the airport influence area overlay is, we need to be thinking about that as well. Now, that might have more impacts to the south of the airport. Maybe it has different impacts as the types of planes that we have at the airport changes. I just want to send my thanks to the mayor, planning, Courtney, and the airport for putting their heads together on this. And I think this will be able to deliver a lot more certainty to the development community about what we can build around the airport, and line up our priorities for both protecting the airport and having more homes in the area if people choose to live there.
Madam Mayor. Maureen, thank you very much for bringing this up. And, this is within my district, and it's it's kind of it's controversial. For talking about the case last year that was approved, I do want to recall for council that it was actually denied by the airport. It was denied by planning, and the council overruled that in a small majority. So this isn't something that was overwhelmingly supported last year for this one development. I guess I would say, Maureen, I believe as it is now, the density is 5 units per acre. Right. And so we're looking at increasing that by 500%. Well, I think it could be a good signal for our development community. I don't see this as a technical edit within our zoning code.
No, just to be clear, these are the policy edits. So these are the 6 policy edits. We're not
Okay.
reviewing technical edits tonight.
Okay. So I guess from a policy side, I would like to see this is more than just we're talking about the decibels per unit. This is also ensuring that this map complies with our airport master plan. And it's not just about noise levels, it's also about safe operation of the airport. And I think we need more feedback on that. I think we need more before we do an extreme one. I would like to see us open this up one to the public for feedback and also to get more technical input outside of just the noise influence.
So what I'll do in these where there's a difference of opinion is I'll ask for motions and votes ultimately on the direction that these things ought to go. Right.
Madam Mayor.
Yeah.
Maureen, thank you. So a couple questions here. So with the increased density that we have in either one of these areas, is there additional sound mitigation that we require for development, or is it just the standard sound mitigation that we would require for anything?
Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, I'm gonna have to pull up the specifics around, I don't know if you have it, Deanna, what we would require. Thank you.
Great. Well,
The
she's
short
looking.
answer is yes.
Yeah, while she's looking that up, just another question. So if we're looking at our purple area here, and sort of the area that's affected, as far as the density goes, that's just outside of that circle, are we still looking at about the same density? Are we looking at about 25 units per acre, or is that still smaller than what we would allow if it was just outside of the
What's purple, red?
purple?
Mayor, Councilmember, are you asking about the densities that are allowable outside the B1?
Yep.
Do we have that information, Deanna? Thanks.
I guess what I'm getting at, I'm trying to understand, it's not that we're allowing more density in an area where we wouldn't allow density. It's actually specifically because of the airport going over the top. It doesn't actually say that like, hey, if this was outside, we'd be allowing about the same amount of units anyway.
Yeah, that is a good clarification point, council member. The B1, the purple, within that purple circle, you see that shaped that's B1. That is the restricted airport area currently. So the other homes around there are not in areas that are restricted. But that's also outside the noise contour. That's what we work through.
Madam
Yep.
Mayor.
And kind of what I'm trying to get at here, though, is just to understand that like the density just on the other side of the line, we're not allowing more density in here than what would be allowed just on the other side of the line. It's actually fairly consistent.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton. So what is happening within the restricted area, the B1, is you have your base zone. And so if your base zone is R1C and you're limited to 12 units per acre, you're limited at that.
Yep.
If you just have zoning that permits, you're in an MX zoning that has more, there's no density limit, you're capped at 25 units per acre. If you're in the airport influence area A, there's no restriction on density. It's just your base zone density restriction. So
Great. Yeah.
you're correct.
Yeah,
Madam-
thank you for that clarification there. And if I could just kind of follow up on a couple more. So when some of the things that spearheaded this in past council decisions, I think the heartburn that I really had wasn't necessarily so much in the density that we were allowing, was the conflict that we would have with the airport, especially when we were talking about applying for future grants and going against what it actually would say in code. And I think that was a little bit of a trigger for the airport of like, hey, if we have these inconsistencies, that's a problem. I don't have a huge issue here because what I would anticipate would happen is that we would update this and then we would say, we're going to behave in these predictable consistencies. So if we did update this and then all of a sudden a conditional use permit came in and we said, oh, well, we just updated this to, 25 units per acre, but we're going to allow 35 units per acre, that's a problem. And so what I would hope would happen is that if we did approve this, we would signal this is the consistent amount of density that we're looking for within this overlay, and that we wouldn't be going above and beyond, because I think that that's really where it causes those conflicts for the airport, and where I had a lot of that heartburn in that first decision wasn't so much in the density, was I don't want to screw up things that are going on at the airport, and if we can make our decisions consistent with what the plan is, totally fine with that. Did you find the answer to that first question?
Yeah, so Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, we would require a hold harmless agreement and then noise reduction, of 30 decibels.
Okay, great, thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Madam Mayor, I just want to make sure we're all on the same page about what the airport influence area overlay is and how it relates to density. I view it as a second ceiling on top of our zoning code. Is that a fair way to look at it? I just want to be clear that we're not proposing more density around the airport above and beyond what is already allowed in our zoning code.
Mayor, Council President Nash, that's accurate.
So in the past, if you wanted to do 25, you had to come get a CUP. It was allowed, but because it was in that B1 double rectangle, you came for a CUP. This is saying the density is allowed. The density per the zone is allowed without the CUP.
I think I'm clear. I just don't want the public to be confused about additional density around the airport.
And Madam Mayor, just one other clarification too, because I think totally agree with Councilmember Halliburton's point. With this change, we will no longer see CUPs for development in B1. So we wouldn't get that kind of hypothetical of increasing above this 25 again. We wouldn't even be able to see a CUP for that. Correct?
Mayor, Councilmember Morales, that's correct.
Madam,
Yes.
pardon me. Marie, do you know when our airport master plan is scheduled to be completed? Do we? I don't know if we have a date on that.
Mayor, Councilmember Corliss, not off the top of my head.
Okay.
I know that they are, or I think I know that, and I shouldn't guess, but that they're prioritizing the land use chapter, but they're in the middle of about an 18-month process, and we can follow up with
Right.
specifically where they are,
Okay.
just to make sure I'm not misspeaking.
Great. And I just want to clarify one thing is I understand that today we have a CUP that may or may not allow more density than 5 units per acre. So just by removing that, by having a CUP, it does not allow for development up to 25 houses per unit. We've only had that last year. So people living in this area who have been in the airport influence, they have had an expectation the whole time they've been living there that the cap was going to be no more than 5 units per acre. And with the new zoning code, could be an exception with no number there. So I just want to make sure we all have an understanding that this is a pretty significant change for this area. Thank you.
All right.
Okay. So just one more slide here as far as what's next and a bit of a timeline. Hoping to affirm final direction today. If we receive that, staff will prepare and submit an application for the zoning ordinance amendment. And then with noticing requirements and all that process entails, that timeline will really kick off after the first of the year with a public hearing before the Planning and Zoning Commission before it comes back to Mayor and Council in March. And then the updated code would go into effect in the spring. And we are happy to stand for any further questions.
Madam Mayor. Or you can
Yeah.
go back to bike parking slide. Big
You
surprise.
bet.
Big surprise. Actually, it's just a kind of a clarifying question. So you were talking about referencing the setback encroachment standards, and I think I just need a little bit more of an explanation on what that means. I'm trying to understand in layman's terms what that means to the public.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton. So in the bike parking section, it specifically said, no bike parking shall be located within the setbacks. We've had some proposals come in where they want to do an accessory shed. We would allow a shed in the setback because of our allowed exceptions and exceptions to an encroachment section. You're allowed to do a shed that's less than X number of square feet in your setback. And if you want to build a shed and put your bike parking in there, we just want the logic to be the same.
Perfect. Totally makes sense. So we didn't have that in there before. Now we're proposing that would be there. If we had that in there before, would it address some of those concerns, or is that an additional concern on top of the other concerns of what folks felt like was excess bike parking?
Mayor, Council Member Halliburton, additional concern.
Okay, great. I mean, of course, I've got a little bit of heartburn here. Really not on any of them except for the multifamily. I think it's great to give some discretion to the director. I think it makes a lot of sense in industrial areas and in some other spots as well. Where my heart hurts a little bit is just thinking about kids that are living in multifamily units who don't have a place to park their bike. And if they've got a unit that's got 3 different rooms inside the unit, potentially we've got 3 different kids and two parents trying to find a place to park their bike other than outside where, it's raining and rusting and going through all the weather. At the same time, like that's a balance for me to think about, okay, well, what does that do to drive up the cost of getting housing in place and the cost of living? I think it's something that I can live with. It's something that I, would like to monitor. Um, if I'm building a multifamily unit and I'm wanting to take care of the people that are living there, I would hope that I would provide, the necessary parking to do so. We've got an apartment complex, Civic Plaza that's been around for a long time, and I go and fix bikes there all the time for the kids, and they're always ruined because they sit outside year after year after year in the weather, and kids' main form of transportation. And so it's challenging for me, but I'm looking at, what is the cost benefit analysis here? And I know that we're not getting some of the units that we need for people to live in, but it is something that, I would like us to be monitoring and observing to see if that really is the case and what we need, especially with next week. We'll have our youth roadmap plan come in front of us. And part of that is a lens of looking through what we're doing at the city, and we're designing the city for youth. And I question a little bit if in some of our specifically multifamily housing, if that is the direction that we would say that we would be going as far as a youth lens, looking at this sort of development. So a little bit of heartburn there. I'm still okay with moving forward. Like the mayor had said earlier, like, perfect isn't the goal, and it shouldn't be, because things are always changing and we have to adapt to those changes. And if we had better transit and we had more people moving around, we may need more bike parking to kind of accommodate, the combination of those trips. I appreciate the word flexibility being used through a lot of this. I always want to make sure that I can kind of give some permission to staff to be flexible to achieve our goals. I think sometimes we are very rigid and like it has to be a 5-foot setback. Well, what if it's 4 feet and 8 inches? I would love to give you the flexibility to say, let's put that ADU in there if we can, move on 4 inches. And so I want to make sure that we're working on giving more flexibility to make it easier to get these projects in place. And I guess the last thing that I would say is that with the ADUs, I'm glad that we're expanding opportunities to make it easier to get multiple ones in or to divide a house. I'm still trying to figure out how we can just make it ridiculously easy in general and address what are the barriers that are getting that ADU in the first place. And I still kind of look at setbacks a lot. Looking at the north end, looking at the Boise bench, looking at the east end, they're all non-conforming and they have no real issues. And if we looked in actually designing the neighborhoods that we wanted to see and making it easier, we could kind of look in the history and see some of that. So I guess my direction would be I would love to give you more flexibility to explore those options in the future, and working with developers and folks to make it as ridiculously easy as we can to build the types of housing that we want. Instead of trying to figure out what are the additional regulations, what are the things we can actually take off the plate to make that process simpler for our mom and pop developers who don't know how to navigate everything. So that's my feedback for now.
Madam Mayor.
Yep.
I probably have a slightly different view on the bicycle parking. I would like to keep it, and I am concerned that if we maintain a high metric on this, that we may not end up being able to keep it, and we might find ourselves in a similar confrontation with the legislature, similar to EV parking. I think one of the biases that I think I have as a council member is that we traditionally only see the absurd results that come from the policy decisions that we make, either through an appeal or just constituents or developers reaching out to us. And I would say the handful of bicycle parking kind of absurd results that we've seen have been quite absurd, whether that's at like a senior home or multiple floors of a high rise, or severely underparked or underutilized bicycle parking in a multifamily development along the Greenbelt. I share all of Councilmember Halliburton's, I think, policy priorities in having bicycle parking, but I don't know if one per unit is aggressive enough to help us keep keep this in place and balance our policy goals with this with what the development community will likely tolerate. So I'll be curious. I'll be taking in public feedback after this meeting to get an idea of how this new policy will set with some of those developers, to get an idea if we can strike a balance between meeting those policy goals of making sure kids in apartments have bikes. I remember my dad never wanting to take our bike off the balcony and track mud through the house. And so I'm sympathetic to that. I'm also sympathetic. We had our bikes stolen on our back patio at all three of them at another apartment that we had. So I want to have those, but I want to make sure that we do it in a way that we can protect this provision of our code long term.
Madam Mayor, I'll affirm the continued direction. I think we're on the right track. I appreciate the evolution of this policy, the code in general that we have, and the opportunity to revisit things and take a pulse check as we move through the projects that we're seeing. I think that generally these changes are aligned with the goals that we have to see more housing in the right places, that and continuing to support that diversity of housing as best we can. And I think that my comments before said where I am on it, where like, yes, and is there more we can continue to do to reduce some of those burdens, to see particularly some of those smaller developments that I think we're generally missing out on. Yeah, thanks, Brian.
Madam Mayor. Thanks, Director Brewer. Appreciate your work on this. And I think I've teased Deanna before, but I think this is now your second PhD in the zoning code that you've gotten. Appreciate that very much. One of the things that I think is really important about this process is that we had a zoning code that was 60 years old. Life had changed dramatically. And the whole purpose was to level set, see how it worked, and then make changes accordingly. And that's a very important piece, I think, for the public. Council's really pushed on this 1 year. Let's make sure and review this and hear about these issues, both the absurd and some of the mundane. One of the things that I would like to hear is, if this goes forward in a public hearing, is the change from 20 to 50 years in the deed restriction. That was obviously in the original zoning code. I've said before, likely most people in this room won't be here in 50 years, with the exception of maybe some of our youth over there. But the reality is it's a half century. It's a long time. I understand that we've had a working group that's worked through this. I am comfortable with taking this out to public comment and seeing what those who would actually choose from the menu think about that before passing judgment on it. It seems too long to me, but I really would like to hear from the development community outside of who's already worked on this. So I'll be supporting moving forward with this with public input.
Madam Mayor. Okay. Maureen, thank you very much. Good to see you here in your new role. Thank you. And Deanna, thank you also for all these changes. As we had our new zoning code put into place, much needed for our outdated 60-year-old code, we see some great things that are coming about this. The developments and the ADUs that we've seen throughout the city, now looking at 2 ADUs or 2 tiny homes or a combination thereof, I think is wonderful, especially in West Boise area in the bench, lot of large lot subdivisions that can hold these 2 units and that can stand up relatively inexpensively. I'm so excited and I look forward to the city also looking forward to like some sort of marketing plan to let the public know that this is happening and these new great options are available. I've already mentioned in regards to the airport influence zone, some of the concerns that it's not just about the noise contouring, it's also about making sure we have a synergy with the airport master plan. It does look, if I'm looking right, that we're going to have public hearing on this in March of 2026. I'm glad to see that. Would like maybe some technical expertise on looking at what this is going to do to change that density from 5 to 25 units per acre on that. Overall, I'm excited with the work that Boise's doing. I just applaud our PDS team and the continued comments you take and the thoughtful consideration of we're doing good. How do we do even better? And as Councilmember Halliburton said, I want to just reiterate that looking at this going forward with the flexibility in mind for our PDS teams so that we can have some of that flexibility as plans come forward that may not be 100% in the box, that hey may need some tweaking in order to make a really great development. And also, how do we make it easier? You know, what restrictions can we move, and the process to approve, what else can we do just to make it easier, and to include how we can stand up some more of the triplexes, duplexes, and fourplexes going forward. So thank you very much for your hard work and PDS team, and I'll be affirming this tonight.
All right. So a couple things just to wrap us up. The process wise. So what will happen now is with the affirmation of direction, PDS staff will move forward submitting this as an application. It'll go to planning and zoning, and then come to the city after that. And so in this interim time between when P&Z hears this, Planning and Zoning Commission hears this, and the council hears this, there are just two things I want to direct staff on. First, before I say that, actually, I appreciate the feedback and the shared value of being as flexible as possible and iterating everywhere we can. But on two items in particular in the interim, I want to address EV parking and bike parking. I want to be clear on EV parking that although it's still the city's position that last year's legislation related to EV parking did not preempt our current requirements, we've received significant feedback from developers about them. And I want to reduce confusion and uncertainty between now and when this change would be in effect when council takes official action by directing staff for current applications to use as much flexibility as possible to address these challenges. So that ideally we wouldn't be seeing the absurd up here in the interim, but that staff can work with your team at PDS to be as flexible as possible. And then similarly on bike parking, as I've asked when we've talked about these changes, but I now want to officially direct staff to use that same flexibility. So in between council taking action, and now if applications are received or they're going through the process, work with those applicants to meet the intent of ensuring that folks have places to park bikes while also reflecting the changes that are being proposed. Right. All right.
Great.
And with that, I thank you.
Thank you
very much for this and all the work that went into it. Next up, we have Chief Dennison with Boise Police Department's strategic plan. I want to thank the chief and for taking on the task of creating this. And you all will see Kelsey Carnoso here from the fire department. She stepped out of her role, stayed in her role, but expanded her role by helping the chief working side by side with the police department on the strategic plan, because Kelsey, you've done incredible work in the fire department. You know how to do this. And they asked for Kelsey's support. And I was so pleased that you were willing to provide it. So big thank you to you as well in this work that now the chief will present. And this work is designed to ensure that we're prioritizing resources most efficiently to support our officers and support our community. Welcome, Chief.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. I'd also like to echo Kelsey's contribution. It was invaluable. I think she learned a lot about the PD. We learned a ton from her. I'd also like to thank my team. I think they did a great job really stepping outside of their comfort zone to do this. As the mayor stated, this is a 10-year plan. What we wanted was something that was data-driven, that would provide a roadmap for the police department, align with city priorities, also aligning with the needs of our staff, not just internally to BPD, but our other city partners, as well as direction we've received from mayor and council. So what we really were looking at was we wanted a plan when we come out for a budget process. It's not a year to year. What do we need? I was introduced to our budget cycle pretty early into my tenure as chief of police. I think I got here in mid-September, and then October I was told, hey, start prepping for the next budget cycle. And what I didn't want to come up and ask for was just, I need additional officers. We really wanted to have something that laid out what we needed, why we needed it. And we were able to do that. I think we looked at what happened with the technology strategic plan and what we're able to get from Axon or with the Axon approval and how that's going to be changing police operations as well as the additional 6 FTEs we got in those specific detective positions and why we needed them. And I wanted something that would provide that roadmap for the next 10 years for us and something that would be adaptable that we could look back on year over year and say, does this still make sense? Is this meeting the department's needs, the city's needs, and the council's needs? And then something that builds an accountability for us that we have to present results back internally and externally to is BPD administration meeting the goals of the plan. So before I jump into the plan, I want to give kind of an overview of the current state of things. Obviously, population in Boise is increased. We're floating right around 250,000 residents. Traffic volume, according to ITD, is up about 4.5%. That equates to about 920,000 additional cars on the roads in Boise every month. Overall workload is up for our officers. It's about 8% up. That is driven by a 21% increase in officer-initiated activity. We actually are right now seeing a drop in public calls for service, which is a nice thing to see. We're down about 3%. That just means our officers are out. We're engaging proactively and trying to drive down problems before they arise. And then another component I want to give is that in addition to our drop in Part 1 crimes, and Part 1 crimes I'm talking homicide, forcible rape, robbery, aggravated assault, burglary, larceny, so your shoplifting, theft from vehicles, packages being sold off porch, things like that. Motor vehicle theft and arson, those are trending. We're trending down in that category by about 18%, driven largely by property crime reductions. But we were, I think 2 months ago, we were actually looking up in sex assaults. We're actually going to be trending down in sex assaults year to date now. So those are all helpful. But not only in the Part 1 crimes are we trending down, but overall crimes reported are trending down. In 2024, 70% of our calls for service were crime related. That's dropped to 65% that are crime related. However, we've seen increased service demands for non-crime. So that's the behavioral health, it's the disturbances, the additional welfare checks, the neighbor disputes, traffic collisions, things like that, that continue to drive our numbers up and create workload strains on our personnel. Traffic stops are up 36% year to date. We're right about 33,000 stops for the year. And citations are up 18%. I can tell you we're close right now. We're slightly below where we were for overall collisions. Currently year to date, we'll see how that continues through the month of December, and overall fatalities are down in comparison to 2024. This obviously reflects strong work from our line level personnel, our officers, detectives, and sergeants. But it is an increased workload that I'm demanding from the officers, and we're doing this at 1.35 officers per 1,000. So I just want to make sure that our service demands don't outpace the growth of our staff. When we built the strategic plan, we had engagement from 285 participants. Kelsey, I believe, spoke with every one of those people. So I'm greatly appreciative for that. So that was staff internal to BPD, other city partners, residents, and city leaders. The top themes that came out of that was trust, transparency, modernization, youth engagement, and workforce resiliency. We took those into account as we were building this plan. And I think this plan actually hits that mark pretty well. So the plan's built on 5 strategic priorities. Every one of our goals are built into this. So it's uphold community trust, invest in our people, advance safe policing, modernize infrastructure, and build organizational strength. Give me a second here. So when we get into one of our first priority, uphold community trust, there's 18 objectives that are in that priority. So think of one of the goals in there is strengthen relationships with underrepresented communities. And how are we going to do that? So if we look at the plan, giving an example of a short-term example is identify a shelter support liaison by 2026 for dedicating consistent communications and dialogue. We've already completed that objective. We've assigned that person. We're building them in specifically with Interfaith coming online up on State Street. And then a long-term example would be expanding the bike unit by 2027 to encompass what we're going to ask from the bike unit, increase patrols down the green belt, along up through veterans with IFS, but still maintain high presence in the downtown and green belt area. Other components that are looking at increased visibility or gap analysis with our NCO teams, our neighborhood contact officers, and increased youth engagement. Priority 2 is investing in our people. We're looking at workforce stabilization as being the foundation for public safety for us, making sure that we're hitting the metrics on retention and hiring. I can tell you we're in really good shape right there. By January, if all holds true, we will have an overhire of sworn by 3 personnel. That's including the additional 6 FTEs that were approved in October. So we're in really good shape there with our recruitment, retention, and a healthy pipeline for new people wanting to come in. Short-term example, developing a department-wide engagement strategy to include annual department surveys for 2026. We really want to hear from our people how we're doing as leaders, how we can improve. So we'll continue to do that. I think Kelsey gave us a great plan with how she got some of the surveys back. I think we can jump on that and we will be moving forward with that. One of the long-term examples is implementing Struggle Well for all new employees as part of the onboarding process, led by in-house trainers in 2029. That's that resiliency training we partnered with Fire on. We have run 2 full 5-day classes. We've had 1 2-day class, and we have another 2-day class for executives within Treasure Valley, other law enforcement fire agency execs, and then Stacy Doty from HR will be attending that training as well. Advanced safe policing, 13 objectives there. Short-term example is in 2026, implement demand-based staffing and deployment models to manage the growth in calls for service. We've already built that plan with shift change occurring in March of 2026. We will be aligning our patrol deployments that will follow along those calls for service. And also in that, we're looking at when our collisions occur, when some of these other activities are occurring that we want to try to drive down through traffic enforcement, making sure that we have enough officers deployed, so that they're not all tied up on calls, that they do have some unallocated time to go do the work in those areas that we need them to be in. And then a long-term example would be an additional expansion of the BHRT personnel in 2028 and 2029. Additional note, when we're looking at our staffing, our goal is to hit a 60% of time for officers would be allocated for calls for service, writing reports. 40% would be proactive. So it's doing that high visibility patrol, traffic safety, traffic stop initiatives, and other on-site activity. Modernizing infrastructure. We have 11 objectives in there. Short-term example is finalizing the facilities master plan in 2026. We anticipate that to be available to us in spring of next year. Then we can blend that into our strategic plan in the city's overall facilities master plan. Long-term examples by 2030 develop and plan to create and support a real-time crime center. Priority 5, build organizational strength. We have 11 objectives in there. Short-term is assign executive sponsor and project leads for all strategic priorities. By 2026, we've already got the executive sponsors. We'll be assigning all the project leads for that in the near future. And then long-term, provide project management implementation training to supervisors by 2028 to equip staff and leadership with all necessary skills and structures to effectively execute the strategic plan. This really goes into the succession planning as we promote people up, as we hire new people, we have retirements. I want to make sure that our team, our leadership team, from our corporals and our sergeants all the way through the chief of police have the training and skills to execute the plan and keep it going forward. We look at the staffing and facility projections. Again, from a 10-year plan, we're sitting at about 1.35 officers per 1,000. We're looking at a target of 1.8 per 1,000. We recently set a floor in patrol of a minimum of 125 deployable officers to maintain baseline operations. The goal there is to make sure we have officers in the field to respond to calls, do that proactive work we're asking them to do, drive down those traffic collisions with increased traffic enforcement, all the other follow-up and on-site activity we want to see from them. and not driving our overtime budget through the roof. So that's where that 125 came from. That number does need to grow, but we felt that was a really good starting point based on our current staffing model.
Madam Mayor, Chief, while you're thinking about that, what do we have right now? If the goal is 125, is that what we have right now? Or
Madam
was
Mayor,
that the goal?
Councilmember Willis, that is currently, we are sitting right at 125 deployable. We do have a handful of officers on light duty, some of them extended light duty for injuries. But deployable today, we have 125 police officers working in a patrol capacity.
Okay, so that what we have right now is the floor.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Mayor. Sorry, Kathy. I think I was louder, but I think she might have beat me. So just kind of a question here. I'm looking at some of our comparable cities like Fort Collins and Spokane. And I guess I look at the goal of 1.8 per 1,000, and it's kind of an interesting number to me because it's not necessarily the community that we serve. Fort Collins is sort of out there on its own, unlike Denver that has everybody coming in from Fort Collins, coming in from Boulder, coming from these other areas. And we have the same thing here in Boise. So not only do we have our population here that we're serving, but we have people coming in from Nampa, people coming in from Caldwell, from Kuna, all over the place. And so I'm wondering if that's the metric, or if there's comparable cities that are more similar to us, and maybe Madison is a little bit more, I'm not sure. But I'm just trying to figure out, like, when we're looking at those trajectories with the growth that we actually see across the Treasure Valley, how does that impact us beyond just that specific number that we're shooting for our own residents?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, we were specifically looking at the total size for the Treasure Valley area. I think we're sitting about 877,000. We do know we get quite a bit of influx coming in from other cities into Boise. That's where we felt the 1.8 number was going to be appropriate. We looked at some of the other cities in there. These were just a few, but there's a lot of other cities. They tend to float around that 1.7, 1.8 to 2 per 1,000 officers per 1,000. We also had to balance that with our service demands. So what does our crime rate look like? Our crime rate is, I like to tell people back home, it's shockingly low. I feel like I live in Mayberry and I won the lottery. I want to keep it that way. But we also have increased service demands that we're applying on our officers with those non-criminal responses, those mental health calls, those check welfares, and then the increased traffic enforcement. So we felt that 1.8 was good. If you're going to give me more cops than that, I'm never going to say no. But we're very comfortable with that number.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate the extra understanding there. This is, I guess, just something I've been thinking about a lot. The Boise, the outsized role that we have to actually play in this community to serve the entire Treasure Valley, and the limited resources that we have to do that, and the kind of challenge that's embodied within there. And as the Treasure Valley grows and Boise remains the capital, and as we have our airport and all these different types of things, the burden that actually does kind of put on both the city of Boise and the police department. So I appreciate you working through that challenge, but it's something I've been thinking about more recently as a city, and our surrounding areas in the state, and the support that really, would be needed to be able to serve this greater metropolitan area.
And Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, I think the other thing is this is what we look at today. We'll be evaluating this plan constantly. And if we start seeing trends in demands on service, and we're concerned that that's going to outpace our staff quickly, we'll come back and say, hey, we need to adjust from 1.8. We need to go up, or maybe we see a stabilization and we can say 1.8 might be a little bit high. But right now, that's where we feel comfortable at putting this as a 10-year plan for.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I appreciate that question, Councilmember Halliburton. I had the same thing written down as how are we accounting for the our outside or our neighboring communities that are coming into Boise for work. So I'm so happy to hear that we are accounting for that today. One other thing I wanted to ask about is went to a conference recently, National League of Cities, and really great information that came out of there. And what I heard from a lot of other cities is that they're deploying programs for drones as first responders and policies with that. Is that something and they're doing that as a quick way to get out there and to assess a situation? Is that something we're looking at putting into place or considering?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Corliss, we have looked at several drones as a first responder program. When I'm looking at technology increases, I think that is a force multiplier. The airport does restrict a lot of our airspace, so that makes it a little bit more difficult for the city of Boise, but it's not a hurdle we can't overcome. And we use drones all the time for operations. but when we're looking at technology, the ALPR, the automated license plate reader system, is a much more impactful for crime fighting tool that I would prioritize over drones as a first responder, based on our current service demands. Again, that may change in a year or two if we see trend shift, but right now I think that would be a priority for us.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad to see that we're considering that and taking a look at how can we use increased technology to help supplement our officers and to keep our community safe. Yeah, thank you.
So we're looking at our staffing projections. Again, we've tied this to population growth. We're looking at that proactive policing and improved response times. With the increase of our officer workload that we have seen this year, we have seen a slight decrease in our response times. It's by 24 seconds, so it is something we continually monitor, and it is part of our metric, or one of our strategic indicators that we'll be looking for in our plan to make sure we're meeting the metrics that we want to meet. So strategic indicators, we have 8 metrics that we'll be comparing this to. So if we look at, I'll give you an example. We don't need to go through all of them in depth, but response time, resolution efficiency, we're looking at what is our response times? Are we meeting those response times? Are we falling behind in what our traditional response times are? And then we're also looking at clearance rates for certain cases. What is our homicide clearance rate? What's our adult sexual assault clearance rate? And are we meeting what we should be meeting? And is that a technology problem? Is a lack of personnel, where then we can really dive into how many detectives do we have assigned in a certain area? What is their caseload? And do we need to add additional personnel if necessary? So those will be things that we'll be measuring. All those 8 will be those indicators we measure our progress against. And when we look at long-term plan execution, looking at annual reports to council and the community, what did we want to hit in 2026? What do we want to hit in 2027? Where did we get to? What were the things that didn't allow us to get there, or what were we successful in? Ensuring that we integrate this with all of our budget cycles. So when we come in, we're asking for stuff, it is coming out of our strategic plan. And looking at continuous data updates. And again, we will review this annually, looking at, okay, does everything in here still make sense based on what we're seeing, trends, community demands, service demands, things along that line. And the whole outcome of this is a forward-thinking, evolving plan that really isn't aligned to meet the community needs, whether it's those coming in from outside of Boise and the specific Boise residents. So with that, I will stand for questions.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Chief, a couple of questions. One of the things that Council Member Halliburton brought up is that, we are growing, but we're not growing as much as surrounding areas. And as the state capital, and I hope we continue to be the center of this valley, we're going to take a lot of that impact. One of the things that you mentioned at the beginning was the amount of cars that have just increase of cars. Could you remind me of what that statistic was? Was it 9,200? Was it 92,000?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Willetts, it was 920,000 was it's coming from ITD data,
Okay.
about 4.5% increase.
Okay. And then I want to just get some clarity on our staffing. I know that that's been a goal for a long time. Is this the first time that we are completely fully staffed and, in fact, up to date with even the new folks that have been allocated? Give me some clarity on that.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Willetts, in January of this year, we touched on that very briefly, and then we had some attrition, retirements, other people leaving, and we started dropping down a little bit, but we've been bumping up against that number. But it's exciting for us with even adding the 6 additional FTEs, the fact that we're going to look at an overhire in January we're excited about it.
Madam Mayor. Chief, well, first, thank you for the presentation. I want to highlight and support your effort, especially related to mental health and wellness support for your officers. And thank you for working with the fire department, who I think has really led the city, I think, in that effort. That's something that's, I think, so important to me, is that our folks, when they show up on somebody's worst day, that they're at their best, and that we're doing everything that we can to make sure that we're taking care of them. So you always have my support in that area as we look at expanding those programs. A couple of things. I think the things that you'll always find council very engaged in and very curious about is related to staffing. And I think a lot of times in the past, we've seen plans or asks that are related to, we need staff growth, but not necessarily to what specific positions and why those positions versus the others. So I'm excited to see how the strategic plan can kind of help you inform us why those specific areas and those positions are needed at that particular time. I do think that, with all the additional traffic that we have coming in from all over the county, we do have some additional challenges there that we see, and we see it playing out in real time. And that's something that I think our council will have to look at as well, and something hopefully that we can make sure that we're planning for. In addition, you'll also find us very interested in any sort of new facilities, crime centers and training facilities, and trying to figure out like what is the long-term planning getting us to having the ability to acquire those. Just a couple things I want to make sure that I mention that I didn't see specifically, but I know that the whole plan isn't there. It's always been, I think, important to this council in the past, and certainly to me, that our police department does the best that it can to mirror the demographics that we see here in the city. And the biggest challenge that we always have are female officers. And so just hoping to see in a strategic plan an effort and a focus on making sure that we're continuing our efforts to recruit female officers into the position. I know those are hard positions to recruit, but just something that I hope makes it into the strategic plan as far as making sure that we're doing our best to match the demographics that we have here in the city.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, that's not specifically drawn out in the plan, but we're constantly looking for the best people to become police officers, including women. We have phenomenal police officers that are women in Boise PD, and we're continuing trying to elevate them. And we have one that we just promoted to lieutenant, and she's doing a fantastic job. So I don't disagree with you at all on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think hoping just to see like where that does match up, whether it's the different types of programs or recruitment efforts that we see out there really kind of dedicated towards women, but like an actual, strategy and plan of like, how do we actually put this in place where, it's not just the people that are applying, but we're focusing specific efforts and programming and recruitment tools to kind of get those. And so, I always kind of say like, if it's in the plan, you're going to do it. If it's not in the plan, it's just going to kind of let it see what happens. And so hoping that we can make sure that we find ways to, bake that into our long-term plans, both on police and on fire, of course, as well. And I think, again, fire has a few different programs that they've done that have been helpful in that recruitment.
Madam Mayor. Thank you so much, Chief. Really excited about this. I think one of the things that's exciting is understanding that there are a lot of different objectives in here, and a lot of these are kind of planting seeds to be able to investigate more and do a deeper analysis of what we have currently, and excited to see what kind of grows forth from that. I'm curious if you have a number off the top of your head or a range on what our daily population growth is for non-Boise residents that are coming in to work, play, recreate, that kind of thing. Vehicles maybe would help tie in that number, but is there an idea of like how many people are in Boise coming in from other municipalities for the day at work or whatnot?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Morales, I don't have that data. The best we're pulling is from the ITD data, just looking at cars that are coming in month over month, trying to compare that against Boise residents. And we know we have a significant amount of people. If you're on I-84 during rush hour coming into Boise, it's backed up. If you're trying to leave going westbound, it's a parking lot. So we know we get a lot of people coming in from outside the city.
Yeah, I think just comment on that. I think that's an important maybe number, because as we think about, needing to serve that population, obviously, sales tax distribution in the state of Idaho, potentially, you think about, what is being brought in the city of Boise, right, but is distributed throughout the state in a formula that has been modified somewhat recently, and thinking about the needs that Boise has to serve folks from outside of the city, and to be able to continue to be a safe place to work, play, and visit. I think is an important kind of conversation to understand how many additional residents the city is serving that's maybe more unique to the rest of Idaho, and where we may need more resources to be able to help serve that.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were done.
Yep.
On that number, while the police department doesn't have it, the economic development team has the number of jobs that would tell. So there's measurements that are taken, the number of jobs per residents that reside within a city, domiciled residents, and we can ask the econ development team or BVEP to share that. And that's a number they would track versus the police department.
Yeah. I think that'd be great just to tie in kind of what that load is and the growth on that load for our police department. And then, I'll just echo Councilmember Halliburton talking about that distribution and what those positions look like, and just kind of echo recent feedback that I've heard. Traffic enforcement obviously was such a big priority, and we're seeing fruits of the increased efforts, but then also understanding, the number of motors that we have, that we don't really have one per police district at this point, that may be an area of kind of seeing what are our gains in terms of traffic enforcement for seeing more motors units, would be really of interest to me at least. Thanks.
Madam Mayor, I just want to make a quick comment to say thank you very much for the presentation and including this. I'm happy to see the metrics you have, the new metrics that are coming out, and just want to put another plug for your traffic enforcement and that increase this year. It's shocking how well it's working. I don't think we've done enough to get that out to the public, the 34% increase in traffic stops. So thank you to you and your team. Appreciate it.
Madam Mayor, thanks. I'll just add, Chief, I really appreciated the work that you've done since you've been here. I think that this is a great way to look forward and figure out how we can achieve what the department needs to continue to be successful. But so far, so good. Thank you so much for your work.
All right. I'll echo those things. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next up, we have a presentation on our emergency preparedness. We've got a couple folks from fire that work on this that'll be joining us this evening to go through the presentation. I'm going to step out just for a moment, but we'll be back before this is over. And you're probably saying this, but while you're setting up, our emergency preparedness team is housed in the fire department. It's just a creature of where it made sense to house it, but they work across and with people from all departments throughout the city and even beyond the city.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council, for the invite today. We really do appreciate it. And as that was stated, we do live within the fire department. We are very grateful for everything within the department. They are huge supporters of everything we do, but we do work across all the city departments and also with our external partners like Ada County Emergency Management and Idaho Office of Emergency Management. So we do liaison quite a bit as well outside those departments. So I am Rachel Holford, and I'm also going to introduce Mallory Wilson. So there is a whopping 2 of us in this office. Imagine that. We do our very best to keep up with everything that is going on, but sometimes it can become a little bit overwhelming. So just a little bit of our backgrounds to kind of give you some insight. We both have significant time in the seat in doing these positions, as well as extensive education to back us. We are very lucky that we have the Emergency Management Institute, which is a national affiliated academy, which allows us to progress in our education. And each of these academies take us approximately a year to complete. And then in between those, they do ask for experience of about a year or 2 before you go on to the next one. So for me specifically, it took me about 6 years to get through all of those. We also attend regular accreditation exercises and different types of schools in order for us to keep up with our skill sets. So for our office, our vision is pretty simple. We want to partner with our city, county, and community resources to prepare, respond, mitigate, and recover from disasters. And we do that in ways of working to plan and prepare for anything that is coming our way, and then also be able to establish protocol that supports us during that response. So everybody becomes very familiar with the frameworks that we utilize, how we communicate, the roles and responsibilities that do take place when there is something that happens. So our core capabilities really do centralize our information and really work to liaison with all of those different partners. Some of our office pillars, this is where we really spend most of our time and our efforts. Preparedness is our number 1. Imagine that it's part of our title. So we do work very heavily in making sure that all of our plans are up to date, they make sense, and they work with all the different stakeholders that we are communicating with. Some of those in that bucket are special events coordination, citywide and multi-department projects, COOP, which is our continuity of operations, EOP is emergency operations plan. We have several mitigation plans, and then we also work very closely with Department of Homeland Security. Some of the other pillars we have with stakeholder engagement, that's both internal, external, our response support that could be during an incident through whatever is going on in the field at the time, and emergency operation centers or pre-planned events. Training and exercise, we specialize in developing exercises that test these plans. We work with various departments and stakeholders to test those to see if they are working, also to give us more practice in those areas, and then also learn where we can improve. And then grants and funding, we do assist with that. That's kind of when we don't have a lot into as of right now, but we do research and look to where we can support people with grants. And then our internal needs. So really our response and support is we are part of all the phases that happen, from the initial response all the way through stabilization and into recovery. And a lot of situations, our incidents are over rather quickly within a few hours and sometimes maybe a day or two. And then we start to move back into that stabilization of how do we start to return to norm, and then that recovery, and that can take an extended amount of time. We have a lot of plans that are out there, and what we do take away from our plans is how do we make them usable? How do we make sure that we can implement them very quickly? They're easy to understand, and anybody that we are plugging into those roles have it at their fingertips and it makes sense to them. So when we talk about these things, we have the plans that are readily available to open and support whatever type of incident comes our way. So this is just a couple of the ones that we do have available to us. The one I did want to highlight is our COOP plan, which is our continuity of operations plan. This was a heavy lift by the city a few years ago and is also the brainchild of Mallory, who is sitting in with us right now. To be able to take a plan and take it off the shelf and say, how do we make this usable in a very chaotic situation? Instead of having to go pull a binder and flip through pages, all of our information is done in a way that we can quickly adapt to whatever is happening. So COOP, we actually have a site that we can go to and we can tell you very quickly what is our list of essential functions that the city does, which ones have been impacted, and then how do we prioritize restoration. Okay. So as those plans exist, we have them ready to pull out when they are needed. So what we're going to talk about now is what does it kind of look like when we actually start to head into an incident, and what is the structure that we use. So many of you are probably very familiar with the ICS, or incident command structure. So I won't go into details, but that is the framework that we rely on. And then the policy group is all of you that are sitting here right now, and also our city leaders that will be providing us direction and anything that is related to an emergency declaration, intergovernmental coordination, and that public information at that high level. So our critical comms framework is when something happens within the city that is smaller in nature, but it is beyond what is our everyday operations. So we usually say 2 or more city services or facilities have been impacted. A text message goes from the incident commander, so that is usually the department director where the incident has occurred at, or their designee, and a message goes to the policy group. In that policy group, you will see there's the chief of staff, the deputy chief of staff of the department with the incident, the community engagement director, the fire chief, the police chief, and myself. Now, and a lot of times that's where that information stops, but we've now shared that out, and then it pushes to those leadership groups, and it may just stay there. It allows that information to get to all of you in a timely manner and ensure you have the proper information and you're not hearing about it through different sources. If that incident begins to grow, we can tap those leadership groups and ask for additional assistance to include activating the liaison group. So the liaison group is we have dedicated employees from different departments who then come together and start reviewing the information and talking about what resources or support may be needed and what are the other things we're not considering yet that we need to get on the radar. Part of the liaison group is also those that are tied to the on-scene incident. So if you go back to the airport hangar collapse, that is where we had Boise fire, and Chief Hummel was reporting in information to that team and to this group, which allowed us to ensure that you guys were getting the proper information in a timely manner. And please, if you guys have any questions about any of this feel free to ask at any moment. Right. Like I said, it is scalable to the incident, and we use it to get that initial information out there and start working on any of those needs.
Mr. Mayor, thank you so much for this. Have we had any other critical incidents like the airport hangar in the last few years? Has that been the one that has involved 2 or more agencies at this point?
That was the most significant one that was within the city. We have had some wildfires to include the Valley Fire, which did spin up this team. And we had the CrowdStrike when we lost the network. And that caused all of our functions to be impacted, and we needed to address that. We have also used it for significant public works geothermal breaks, which have impacted city facilities.
Great. And then Rachel, could you go back just one slide?
Yes.
So first of all, thank you for all of this work. This is really tedious to do in advance, but it is so necessary. So I appreciate it. I know that it takes a lot of time to do. I want to make sure that we understand as council, like how this works. So the department will basically contact the policy group, includes the chief of staff. Chief of staff will then contact Amanda and council leadership, or just Amanda on that leadership groups. Aha, Courtney's coming up here. We've got her. We've got her up.
Council member, it depends. In the last several incidents, which I would say also included COVID, which was not a short one, it was a lengthy situation. I either tend to call council leadership myself. That's usually the way I do it. So I call the mayor, then the council president, then the council pro tem, and then I always give the option of calling the rest of you. But traditionally, leadership chooses to contact each of you. If it was during the day, which it never is, I would probably default to Amanda to get that information out, but it's usually not conducive to working hours.
Thank you, Courtney. I appreciate that.
Mr. Mayor, I'll just quickly add, I think I've only been contacted in this kind of scenario really just like 1 or 2 times. And I will say that anytime now I see Courtney calling me, it's an immediate panic about, oh my gosh, what happened? It's not always an emergency response, but certainly that's a call I'm going to pick up.
Mr. Mayor, just one more comment. I really appreciate this line of communication. It's really important. You know, we all have our own networks in which we hear about things from the city, and it's particularly on these things that are so impactful to people's lives, particularly like the airport hangar. Really appreciate the efforts to like get to us immediately. I mean, at that point, Meredith actually called me, and my son-in-law works at a hangar, so I was like, I'll have to call you back. I have to figure out which one he's at. So, I mean, we all know someone within the community that is affected by these. So I really appreciate this line of communication. I know it takes a lot. So thank you.
Mr. Mayor and Councilmember Willits, and also Councilmember Stead, appreciate those comments. And the goal of this was, we found during other incidents, information wasn't making it to you all in a timely manner. And as we know, when that happens, we're searching for information. It may not be the most accurate. We want you to feel very confident that you will receive information. It will be accurate. And when we have asks, we come ready with them for that discussion. Another wonderful example that we do have was recently we utilized this to activate when we had the public works sewer incident. And that'll be an example I show you here momentarily, where the team got together. We came around public works to learn what was happening, to think about those additional impacts to start considering. And as that progressed, it did become a larger incident, which then involved an EOC, but it did start here with those notifications going out. So it's a wonderful segue into when a larger or more complex incident starts to develop, which could also be a pre-planned event. We do activate the Emergency Operations Center. And the Emergency Operations Center is designed to be your epicenter for all of your communication, your resource coordination, any of that shared situational awareness, and centralizing your documentation, which is extremely important. If we are all operating towards the same objectives and we are collecting the same information and sharing it, we are going to be far more successful in whatever we are attempting to do. So as you can see here, the policy group receives information and gives direction to the Emergency Operations Center. Now, all of these items in the bubbles that you see here can operate independently or without an EOC. So the EOC is as needed based on the complexity or support requested by those different bubbles. So the bubbles we talk about are the Department Operations Center. That's everyday stuff that is going on. And most of our departments do phenomenal, and if something happens, they manage it very quickly and they go back to their standard operations. No need for additional assistance. We do have command posts that do pop up. Those are more of your tactical. You will see those during like an incident for police or fire, and at times a special event, but it's very manageable. It never reaches that level of needing additional assistance. And then as we get more complex, you might see an incident management team. An incident management team is usually cross-functional with roles and personnel from various departments that are now coming together to mitigate whatever is currently happening. And then the critical comms group, as we discussed, that's that bridge between everything going on and that initial assessment of, do we need more, or is it being handled in a way that is going to wind down rather quickly? Interesting note, we do not have a physical location for an EOC anymore within the city. Usually if we fire up the EOC, it is either virtual or we find a conference room or council chambers that we can take over. So they are wonderful, but if you build a room with wonderful technology, people will come. And since we don't always have an emergency, we tend to lose access to those facilities or those locations. So something to consider in the future is if we can find a physical home again, that would be fabulous.
Right. Madam Mayor, quick question. Along those lines, like a mobile, what kind of mobile center might work in, being able to take it wherever? Is that something that could be part of that? Have you set up outside somewhere with some sort of trailer, that kind of thing?
Madam Mayor and Councilmember Morales, thank you for that question. We do have a mobile trailer that allows us to operate off-site. It is one that was purchased through grant funds and is considered a citywide asset. So you will see that likely when we had the Valley Fire, it was out for that. So we do have that capability, which is wonderful. It is something that you probably don't want to work out of for very long because it is cramped. But thank you. Yes, we do have that capability. All right. So as a larger incident does start to take place, you will see the ICS structure start to grow. And this is what it would look like. So we have mayor, council, city leadership, the Emergency Operations Center, the Joint Information Center or system, I apologize, is also where you're going to have your PIOs, the community engagement and so forth, gathering information and start to work on that messaging that we want out there. Messaging is extremely important. We want single source messaging and we want it to be accurate. So that information is all happening there. And then below the EOC is those other teams that are working that may be part of managing the incident on scene. If it is something where we are reaching out to other agencies, we would have what's called a multi-agency coordination, which is likely handled at the Ada County emergency management level. And then we are checking in with them and getting information and sharing our status and update and requests through them. So here's a great example of how this worked here recently. So we did have the public works sewer incident. So as that became information that came to the critical comms team, we did learn that there was going to be some additional resources needed and some additional staffing and responses that were coming out of that. So we worked with Public Works, and as you can see here, they were the incident command. And then we filled in the gaps and centralized all of the communication, the documentation, and the plans that were going around to just support them in being able to manage the things that were on their plate. They did a phenomenal job, and we were very grateful to be alongside them. As you can see from the structure, they reported all that information over to the policy group through Christine Miller, who then was able to share that with all of you. Okay. So we are constantly working on development and improvement. So practice what we say is we practice what we preach, meaning these are our real world examples of recent things that we can go back to say, this happened, we utilize these plans, and then we did after action reviews to learn from them so that we could be better about it in the future. So on the list, CrowdStrike. That was when we lost our network. That was a call in the early morning hours, which, yes, they never happen Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. It's just the way that it is. The large geothermal breaks, at times those will happen, and it is something that we come together on to figure out what that's going to mean, because it can impact more than just facilities. It could be roadways, emergency ingress, egress access. We have the public works sewer incident we just talked about, the Valley Fire, airport hangar collapse, and all of our large special events. We do the exact same thing. So we are doing this constantly. And so it becomes something that we're all very familiar with. Exercises that we have facilitated and supported in the recent year or two was the airport tri-X, the airport security tabletop exercise, the ASHA program, which is our active shooter hostile engagement response program, our evacuation tabletop, and then working with our community neighborhoods for the community preparedness program. Those two are highlighted because I will break those down just a little bit to you guys. So we have a lot of special events. We love them. They are very consistent and they have a lot of moving parts. So what we've done is we've taken that ICS structure and applied that to how we manage our complex special events. We created a special events hub that allows us to centralize all information in regards to the planning for that event, especially in regards to any of the safety and security elements that we need to be able to cross-coordinate on between police, fire, paramedics, ACHD, Parks and Rec, you name it. That's where we go to be able to work on all of those plans together. This is open to all employees, and then it has permission-based access to our first responders who need the more detailed information. As you can see here in 2025, we had 204 events, which they continue to grow. And you can see our busy months along with our attendance. So to go along with Chief Dennison's conversation of all the people that come here for work, we also have a lot of people who come here to play. And that increases significantly our attendance, our traffic, our crowd movements, our calls for service do tend to go up. So we work very closely with our large events to ensure that they have the appropriate on-site resources available. One of the ways that we do that is a security assessment with all of the events, and we look at the complexity. Complexity takes into account everything from what does that footprint look like? How complex is the traffic control? Do they have on-site medical? What is security resources? All the way to what is the weather impact that could potentially happen if they don't have a plan? So we are taking into account all those things and bringing it together and saying, what's the complexity and what are those contributing factors for when things become more complex? What we're seeing is our events are becoming more and more complex, which isn't necessarily a negative thing. It just means that we need to be more cognizant of our planning. And we also look at what's happening nationally and apply that to how we manage things here, because we want to learn from those things and hopefully keep them from happening here. So part of the Special Events Committee is also a safety and security team, and we meet specifically with the event to work through each of those elements that we're showing here. So we have police, fire, Ada County Highway District, paramedics, Parks and Rec, and the city community engagement rep. When we work through all of those, we want to make it very transparent and clear for the event on what those expectations are. That is all documented and ensure that it matches with what they are putting in their permits. Based on that, for those more complex events, our office facilitated 44 meetings. So that's 44 different events. We have already held 37 after action meetings with those same events. Those after actions, we review what worked, what they are going to keep for next year, and where there might need to be areas for improvement to hopefully set them up for an entire year to plan for any of those changes that need to happen. And then we also ask them, is there anything major you're planning that we can start to assist you with? So we're not waiting for that 60 to 30-day window before an event and find out there's something very large they want to add. We want to help them through that process as best as possible. So the documentation that does come out of all of that is we did 31 info packets that goes out to our emergency services that gives them a map, schedule, emergency contacts, and anything that they might need to know about that event should they have to respond there. That also, in the larger, more complex ones, those are incident action plans, which includes everybody's roles, responsibilities. And that is what we utilize for the EOC portion of it. We did 11 of those and 17 events. We did walkthroughs. Walkthroughs are before the event, we go down and make sure everything matches to the agreed upon plans. And then we did activate the EOC 9 times this year.
Madam Mayor, clarifying question, what would determine a complex event? You said they're getting more and more complex. What are the kind of inputs to make it complex?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Willetts. Some of the things that are making it more complex is we are seeing larger footprints. So, or multiple venues. Treefort is a prime example. It continues to grow. It's a wonderful event, but they keep adding venues. They keep adding more and more to the footprint. So you're bringing in a larger crowd, which means you need more security, more medical, et cetera. Some of the other things that we're seeing is events that are coming and they are having larger routes. Take into account Ironman, for example. That's an extensive lift with a lot of traffic control and a lot of resources. So it tends to come back towards the size of the event, adding additional attractions, and then needing to have those more resources or larger resources available.
Madam Mayor, and I'm assuming that there is a cost to that. I mean, it's part of the permit. The events have to pay for the increased security. It's not something that the city will compensate for alone. I mean, that is a cost to do the business of the event for the organizer.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Willetts, I will not go into the details because I don't always have an insight into what is being paid, what is not being paid. I do know that the events are invoiced for the specific amount of staffing that are part of that for the on-site resources. When we do the walkthroughs and we do an EOC support, we do not charge them. We feel that that is something that we do because if something did happen, it's larger than just the impact to the event. It's also impacting our community. Okay. And then moving on to our community preparedness program. So this has come about thanks to many of you who have reached out on behalf of many of our neighborhood associations who have asked for conversations in regards to what I do if this happens. In a lot of situations, it's talking about wildfire and evacuations. And as you'll see here, the Warm Springs Mesa is what really kind of kicked it off for us. We found a neighbor who was extremely engaged and wanted to do more. And what we learned from it is we love this. We love the idea of it. However, we needed to put some framework to it to kind of keep it on the rails and set expectations accordingly, and also open it up to all neighborhoods. Every single neighborhood should have the ability to request support in their emergency planning. And so we have been working through developing this program, which will allow neighborhoods to apply and request what level of assistance they are looking for in their planning, and then allow us to be able to support that and have those conversations. Everybody loves the idea of an exercise or a drill, but it is a heavy lift on all of our resources and our community. So what we want to do is make sure they're working through those processes to build those foundational pieces. And if we get to that exercise, wonderful. That's kind of the bow on the package, but there are so many other things that could be being done ahead of time to get us there. So that allows us to continue that work, also be respectful of our resources, time, and energy as well.
Madam Mayor, I just wanted to applaud you for your work on this specifically. I had worked closely with the Mesa neighborhood as they were going through this, and they had such a great experience and really valued the learnings from that and are still implementing that with new neighbors as they move in and running their own drills to keep the information fresh. So I am really grateful for the adaptiveness that you're now opening this up as a program that others can sign up for. And I can also appreciate the kind of like the customization that's required for each unique neighborhood. And we're so lucky to be surrounded in this city on a few sides by open space. And I think that comes with also some nerves in those neighborhoods, and that it's going to be very valuable, I think, as it continues to roll out. And I look forward to sharing that information out when it's available so that we can be sure that some of those that were eager to be first in line can get their applications in. Thanks for all your work on that.
Madam Mayor,
Oh,
just clarifying question on this. Neighborhood associations are going to be applying for this, or is it open to other types of, smaller groups, neighborhoods?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Morales, we are starting with neighborhood associations. And the reason why is we do believe that there is work to be done under that umbrella that would make this an even smoother and more efficient process if they've gone through those things. We also would be open to those conversations later. Some of it is our bandwidth and our availability to be able to take on multiple at the same time. So some of those structures would assist us in being able to do that.
Okay. Yeah, just a comment. I would just say it might be helpful to think through what that might look like for a very large neighborhood association like Southeast Neighborhood Association, where you have a variety of neighborhood types and challenges, and it's huge. And so that may look different than maybe a more concise neighborhood association like Warm Springs Mesa. So I'd be curious how a neighborhood like that might look at it. And maybe it's a partial, maybe it's the neighborhood association applying for it for a portion of that neighborhood that has a specific challenge, but might be interesting just to think through that and give them that suggestion.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Morales, thank you for that. We greatly appreciate that. And we are open to those conversations. And as we start to roll this out, I think we'll have a lot of lessons learned. So again, open to those. If neighborhoods are coming to you, please bring them our direction so we can have those conversations and figure out how best to support everybody. So 2026, these are some of our large projects that we have coming. So we will be updating the city EOP, the city COOP. We have some additional members to include in there, to include our deputy chiefs. We will make sure that they are accounted for in those succession plans, family and friends reunification plan, and our countywide hazard mitigation plan. In the works currently, and we are moving forward on them, is countywide evacuation zones. That is a project with all of our emergency response agencies and Ada County Emergency Management. Special event resource tracking. What we are learning is we are putting a lot of resources out there and we need to have some hard numbers. So part of that is starting to see how many officers were there, what was the medical service levels, paramedics, EMTs, et cetera. We need a better understanding of these things. And then our city risk and safety working group. Okay. So that's what I have for you all today.
Rachel, I so appreciate the update and to see the scope of work that you're doing, I think is helpful for all of council and for the community as well. Really appreciate the work, doing good things. You and Mallory as your team. And Chief, thanks for being here too.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Council.
All right, we will break until 6.